I lived with my wife, Ebony, in a small village. We'd been together for years, and we had 7 daughters. Each one was bright and lovely, but I had always dreamed of having a son to carry on my family name. That dream became a frustration, and, over time, I began to blame Ebony, even though it wasn't fair. One day, outside our house, we got into a heated argument. "Ebony," I shouted, "I asked for a son, but you gave me 7 daughters. Why can't you give me a boy?" Ebony looked hurt but held her ground. "Obi, I don't control that. I love our children. They're blessings," she replied firmly. I shook my head. A man needs a son to carry on his name. Girls are nice, but they aren't enough. You should focus on your duties, take care of the house, cook, clean. Women belong in the kitchen. That made her angry. Our daughters are smart, kind, and hardworking. They can do anything a boy can. One day, they'll make us proud. A daughter can be just as valuable as a son. Her words caught me off guard. I looked around and saw neighbors staring, and for a moment, I felt a bit ashamed. But before I could respond, a wealthy man named Akin, who was visiting the village, stepped up, having overheard our conversation. He looked curious and sympathetic. "Excuse me," Akin said, "I couldn't help but hear your argument. What's going on here?" I sighed, sharing my frustration. "I have 7 daughters, but I wanted a son. I feel like they can't do what a son could. I'm disappointed." Akin shook his head with a gentle smile. "Children are blessings, Obi, whether boys or girls. I never had children or a wife myself, and I know the loneliness of not having a family." His words surprised both me and Ebony. Then Akin offered an idea. "If you're open to it, I'd be honored to take 2 of your daughters to the city. They can go to school, learn new things, and help me around my home." I felt a spark of excitement. "Yes, Akin, I agree, it would be good for them." Ebony seemed unsure but also hopeful. Akin smiled and promised, "I'll return in 2 days to take them with me." He waved goodbye, leaving us to think about the change coming our way. When he left, Ebony turned to me, her face flushed with anger. "Obi, how could you even consider giving our daughters to a stranger? How can you think of doing this just for money? It's not safe." I frowned. "Quiet, woman. Your daughters are as useless as you. I'm tired of taking care of them all." Ebony looked hurt but didn't back down. "They're our children, Obi. They deserve love and a future. They aren't useless, they have dreams." I waved my hand dismissively. "They're girls, they belong in the kitchen. They need to learn to cook and clean, that's all they need." Ebony shook her head. "That's not true, Obi. They can do anything they want. Just because they're girls doesn't mean they're less important." Our argument hung in the air. I wanted a son, and that need clouded everything else. Ebony, though, refused to give up on our daughters. 2 days later, Akin returned to take the girls to the city. As he arrived, I pulled him aside and said quietly, "Akin, my twin daughters are only 15, but if you're interested, you could marry one of them." His eyes lit up at the suggestion, and he nodded eagerly. "That sounds perfect. I'd be interested in marrying one of them," he replied. I felt a rush of control and excitement. "But there's a price. You'll have to pay me a good amount for this." Akin didn't hesitate. He pulled out a large sum of money and handed it over. With the cash in my pocket, I felt powerful, convinced that I'd solved my problems. But I warned him, "Don't tell Ebony I took money for this. She'll be furious, and I want to keep it between us." Akin agreed, and we made our deal. Once we arrived in the city, Akin gathered my daughters, Alaba and Adola, into a small room. Alaba, the elder one, looked around curiously, while Adola, the younger one, clung nervously to her side. Akin's face turned stern. "Listen to me," he told them. "Your parents have sold you to me. You won't be going to school, making friends, or even using a phone. Your job here is to cook, clean, and obey me. Alaba and Adola looked at each other in shock. Sold us? Alaba whispered, horrified. We thought we came here for a better life. Akin shook his head, unbothered by their reaction. This is your life now. You'll follow my rules, no school, no friends, no fun. Only work. Tears filled their eyes as they realized their dreams of a brighter future had been crushed. They had hoped to go to school, make friends, and explore the city, but now they felt trapped. Akin then called the security guard and gave strict instructions. Don't let Alaba or Adola leave this house. Keep the gates locked, and don't let them talk to anyone outside. Yes, sir, the security guard replied, understanding the seriousness in Akin's voice. Soon after, Akin started buying expensive gifts for Alaba, jewelry, clothes, perfumes, but Alaba wanted nothing to do with him or his gifts. When she refused them, Akin's frustration boiled over. Alaba, he said, narrowing his eyes, you're my wife now. You should be grateful for these gifts. Alaba glared back, defiant. Your wife? I never agreed to be your wife, and I never will. You're old enough to be my father. I don't want anything from you. Her words hit him hard, and his face turned red with anger. How dare you speak to me that way, you ungrateful girl? You're just the daughter of a poor, greedy man who sold you. You should feel lucky I even look at you. But Alaba didn't back down. Her heart filled with defiance, and she promised herself she'd never let him control her spirit, no matter how trapped she felt. She went to her room and sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face, feeling utterly alone. Just then, Adola walked in and sat beside her, concerned. Alaba, what's wrong? She asked gently. Alaba wiped her tears, trying to hold on to the little hope she had left. Just then, Adola walked in and saw me crying. Alaba, what's wrong? She asked, sitting down beside me. I wiped my tears, trying to steady my voice. It's Akin, I said. He told me I'm his wife and tried to give me fancy gifts. Adola, I don't want any of it. I don't want him. Adola looked at me, surprised. But it's just a gift. Why didn't you take it? I would have. I stared at her, shocked. Are you serious, Adola? You think I should just take his gifts and let him call me his wife? She nodded. Yes. This is the life I've always dreamed of, fancy things, a big house, and someone to take care of us. Why not accept it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, if that's what you want, you can have him. I don't care. I just want him to leave me alone. Adola's eyes lit up. Are you serious, Alaba? You don't want him at all? I shook my head firmly. No, Adola. I don't want him, his gifts, his house, or anything he tries to give me. I just want him to stay away. Adola sat quietly, processing my words. I turned away, feeling trapped but determined. I knew what I wanted, and no gifts or promises would change my mind. Back in the village, my mother, Ebony, learned the truth about what my father had done. She had believed Akin would give us a better future. But then she overheard villagers gossiping about how Obi had taken money from Akin for one of his daughters to be a wife. Ebony's heart raced with anger and sadness. She rushed home, confronting Obi. How could you do this? She shouted, her voice filled with emotion. You sold our daughters to Akin. I thought they were going for a better life, to learn and help around the house. How could you lie to me like this? Obi crossed his arms and glared. Shut up, woman. I am the man of this house. What I say stands. Tears filled Ebony's eyes. But Obi, they are just children. How could you let this happen? They are our daughters, and they deserve better. He shrugged. They're girls. I don't have to explain myself to you. I got money for them, and that's what matters. You should be grateful. Ebony was stunned. Grateful? For what? Selling our daughters? Do you even care about their happiness? Obi's face hardened. I care about providing for this family. Money is what matters. If they want to come back, they can, but they're with Akin now. Ebony's heart broke as she thought of Alaba and Adola. She wanted to protect us from this terrible fate. You don't understand what you've done, Obi. You've put them in danger. What if they need our help? We should bring them back. But Obi's face remained cold. It's too late for that. They're gone, and there's nothing we can do. Just accept it. Desperate, Ebony decided to call Akin herself. She couldn't sit back, knowing her daughters were in danger. With a trembling hand, she picked up the phone and dialed. When Akin answered, she begged, "Please, Akin, bring Alaba and Adola back. They are my daughters, and I'm asking you to return them home." Akin's tone was mocking. "Oh, look who's calling," the poor woman begging for her daughters. "You really think I'll just hand them over?" Ebony felt a chill run down her spine. "They are just children, Akin. You can't keep them. They deserve to be with their family." Akin laughed coldly. "Listen, Ebony, if you ever call me again, I'll make sure you're locked up for good. You'll never see them again, they are mine now. You have no power here." Tears streamed down Ebony's face. "Please, Akin, you don't understand how much they mean to me. You can't treat them like this." He cut her off sharply. "I don't want to hear your sob story. Your husband sold them to me. You're just a poor woman with no say in this." Then he hung up, leaving Ebony feeling hopeless and terrified. She knew she had to find a way to get us back, but it seemed impossible. As for Akin, since I continued to refuse his advances, he turned his attention to Adola. Being younger and more impressionable, Adola became excited when Akin started spoiling her with expensive gifts. He bought her beautiful dresses, sparkling jewelry, and fancy meals. Adola felt like a princess. "Look at all these amazing things," she exclaimed to me one day, showing off her new clothes. "Akin is so generous." I felt a mixture of anger and worry. I couldn't believe she was accepting gifts from the man who trapped us in the city. "Adola, you shouldn't be with him. He's not good for you. He's much older and only wants to use you." But Adola laughed and brushed me off. "Why do you care, Alaba? He treats me like a queen. I don't understand why you rejected him. He takes me to fancy hotels and restaurants. This is the life I always wanted." I shook my head in disbelief. "This isn't a life, Adola. It's dangerous. You think he cares about you, but he just wants to control you. He won't let you go to school or have real friends. You'll be trapped." Adola crossed her arms defiantly. "You're just jealous because you won't accept his gifts. You could have all this too if you'd open your heart to him. You're making a big mistake." I felt a deep sadness for her. I wanted her to understand that life wasn't just about fancy clothes and expensive meals. It was about freedom, happiness, and being with people who genuinely cared. I don't want any of that if it means being with someone like Akin. I want us to be free and happy. Adola rolled her eyes. "You're missing out, sis. I'm going to live my best life, and I don't care what you think." As the days passed, Akin continued to shower her with gifts, taking her to fancy dinners and buying her anything she wanted. Adola was thrilled, feeling like she was living the dream she'd always wished for. Soon, with Akin's money, she began sending gifts to our parents, clothes, jewelry, and even some money. Every time a package arrived, Ebony's eyes sparkled with joy. "Look at these lovely clothes," she exclaimed one day, holding up a bright dress. "Adola is so thoughtful. And this jewelry, it's beautiful." With each new gift, Ebony felt more grateful to Akin, forgetting the worries she once had about her daughters. Whenever Akin called, her tone softened. "Hello, Akin. Thank you for everything you've done for my family. We really appreciate it." Akin enjoyed her gratitude. He chuckled and replied, "Of course, Ebony. Adola deserves the best, and I'm happy to provide for her." But soon, news spread in the village that 15-year-old Adola was now married to a man old enough to be her father. Gossip spread from one person to the next, and eventually, it reached Ebony. One day, a nosy neighbor, Inoi, came over, her voice loud with anger. "Ebony, can you believe what people are saying? Your daughter is married to that old man. How could you let Obi sell her like that? It's shameful." Ebony's blood boiled at Inoi's words. "You don't know anything, Inoi. Mind your own business. Adola is happy, living a life of gifts and luxury. She's experiencing things you can only dream of." Inoi shook her head. "Happy? You call that happiness? A child married to an old man? It's wrong, Ebony. You should be ashamed for letting this happen." But Ebony stood her ground, crossing her arms defiantly. "You don't understand. We're finally living a good life now," I told Inoi proudly. "Adola sends us money and nice things. I'm proud of her." Inoi frowned, her expression serious. "Money doesn't matter if your daughter is suffering. This isn't a life for a young girl, Ebony. She deserves a chance to grow, to learn, and to be with someone her own age." I rolled my eyes, dismissing her. "What do you know about happiness, Inoi? My family is doing better than ever. You'll never experience this kind of life, so stop talking about things you don't understand." With that, I turned my back, refusing to hear more. Inoi left, shaking her head in disappointment. Back in the city, Akin was treating Alaba poorly, belittling her and trying to manipulate her into accepting him. "You're just a girl," he would say with a look of disdain. "But you're more beautiful and intelligent than your sister. Why won't you let me spoil you? You could have everything you've ever dreamed of." Alaba felt anger and sadness at his words, seeing through his manipulative compliments. "You're foolish, just like my parents," she shot back. "I will never be with you. Not in a million years." Akin's expression darkened, his voice turning cold. "Fine, be ready to die, you ungrateful girl." Alaba felt a shiver down her spine, but she didn't let him intimidate her. "I'm not afraid of you," she shouted back. "I will never be yours." Akin stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can refuse me after I brought you here, gave you gifts, and took care of you? I can take it all away in an instant. You should be grateful." "I don't want your gifts," Alaba said defiantly. "I don't care about fancy clothes or money. I just want to be free and go back to my family." Akin scoffed. "Your family? They sold you to me. They didn't care about you, so why should I?" Alaba felt tears welling up but held them back. "Maybe they made a mistake, but that doesn't mean I have to accept your twisted version of love. I deserve better than this." Akin laughed cruelly. "You're just a girl who thinks she knows better. You're not special, Alaba. You're just a pawn in this game. Accept your fate, or it'll get worse." Alaba clenched her fists, a surge of determination rising within her. "You may think you have power over me, but I won't be your pawn. I'll find a way to escape. You won't win." Akin's face reddened with frustration. "You're making a big mistake, Alaba. You don't know who you're dealing with. I can make your life a nightmare." With that, he turned and left her alone. Alaba felt a mix of fear and bravery. She promised herself that no matter what, she wouldn't let him break her spirit. Months later, Adola started feeling very sick. Concerned, Akin took her to the hospital. When the doctor revealed she was pregnant, Adola was overjoyed, hoping this might bring her and Akin closer. She imagined he'd be proud and that they could finally become a real family. But Akin's reaction was far from what she expected. He looked at her coldly and said, "I don't want children. You were only for fun. I never planned to have a child with you." Adola's heart sank, her hopes shattered. Determined to keep things the way they were, Akin paid the doctor a large sum to end the pregnancy. He didn't care about Adola's wishes or dreams, he only cared about himself. Sadly, Adola's health declined after the procedure, and 2 days later, her body couldn't recover. She passed away in the hospital. When Alaba heard the news, she was devastated. Her sister, her only friend in the city, was gone. She cried bitterly, her heart broken by the loss. Akin barely looked at her grieving face. Instead, he coldly picked up the phone to call Obi. "Obi, I have sad news," he said calmly. "Adola fell very ill and she didn't make it." Obi's voice was filled with shock. "What? How could this happen? Why didn't you call us sooner?" Akin replied coolly, "I didn't want to disturb you. It all happened very fast." Without any further explanation, he arranged for Adola's body to be taken back to the village for burial. He didn't allow Alaba to attend her sister's funeral, afraid she might try to escape if she returned to the village. Left alone, Alaba's sadness turned to deep hatred for Akin. She couldn't believe how cold and selfish he was, a man who had taken everything from her and her sister. She called him a murderer and spat out, "You're a fool if you think I'd ever love you. You're a weak, old man, and I despise you." Akin tried to keep her quiet, offering gifts, but nothing changed her feelings. One morning, Inoi, our nosy neighbor, stormed into my house, her voice loud and full of anger. "Ebony, don't you see how foolish you are?" she shouted. "How could you let Akin, a heartless man, bring your daughter's body back without asking a single question? Are you not even curious about what happened to her? No doctor's report, no autopsy, nothing?" I felt embarrassed, not knowing what to say. I looked away, avoiding her glare. Inoi continued, "And your greedy husband, Obi, is the most foolish of all. How could he trust that man with your daughters and now just accept Adola's death like it's nothing? Have you both lost your senses?" I tried to respond to Inoi, "Please." Akin said she got sick. It happened so fast. Inoi interrupted, furious. "Sick, and you just believed him? Do you even care what happened to Adola? Or are you too blinded by the little gifts Akin sends you?" My face turned pale, a seed of doubt growing in my heart. When Obi came home that evening, I nervously shared what Inoi had told me. "Obi," I began, "Inoi thinks we should question Akin about Adola's death. It doesn't make sense that he just brought her body back without an explanation. Shouldn't we try to find out more?" Obi waved his hand dismissively. "Ebony, stop listening to that noisy woman. Inoi just loves to gossip. I trusted Akin with our daughter. He's a noble man, responsible and wealthy. Why would he harm Adola? He wouldn't do that." "But Obi," I said, my voice trembling, "what if Inoi is right? What if something happened to Adola that we don't know about?" Obi's face hardened. "Enough, Ebony. Akin is a good man. He took care of Adola and even paid for her burial expenses. You should be grateful, not suspicious." I fell silent, my heart heavy. Deep down, I knew Inoi might have a point, but Obi was too stubborn to listen, too blinded by his trust in Akin to consider any other possibility. Annoyed by Inoi's interference, Obi decided to confront her husband. He found him outside their home and marched over, looking stern. "Listen," Obi said firmly, "you need to keep your wife away from my family. She's been spreading nonsense about my daughter's death, making my wife doubt my decisions. I don't appreciate her meddling." Inoi's husband looked surprised. "I'm sorry, Obi. Inoi can be outspoken, but I'll speak to her. She didn't mean any harm, sometimes she just gets carried away." Obi's expression stayed cold. "She better stay out of my family's business. If she keeps interfering, I'll have Akin handle things, and he's not someone you want as an enemy." Inoi's husband took a deep breath. "There's no need for that, Obi. I'll make sure Inoi doesn't involve herself in your matters again. She understands it's not her place." "Good," Obi replied. "This better be the last time I hear her name in my family's affairs." "You have my word," Inoi's husband said. "It won't happen again." Obi turned and walked away, confident he'd put an end to the issue, at least for now. Akin grew more desperate as I continued to reject him. Instead of giving up, he began a cruel plan. Each evening, he'd mix something strange into my food or drink. Soon, I'd start feeling drowsy, my eyelids heavy, unable to stay awake no matter how hard I tried. In the mornings, I'd wake up feeling strangely uncomfortable, with aches and confusion, though I couldn't remember anything specific. At first, I thought it was just the stress, the grief of losing Adola, being far from home, and dealing with Akin's cold, controlling behavior. But as the days passed, I noticed this drowsiness and exhaustion were happening too often. It frightened me. I'd go to bed feeling alert, only to wake up with missing memories and a growing sense of dread. One day, as I sat by the window, lost in thought, I tried to make sense of everything. Akin had promised Adola and me a better life in the city, but it had turned into a nightmare. Adola was gone, and I was left alone with a man who seemed more dangerous each day. My heart felt heavy with grief and anger. I missed my family and wondered if they even knew what I was going through. I thought of my father, Obi, and my mother, Ebony, hoping they hadn't forgotten me. But would they even believe me if I ever told them the truth? Soon, I began feeling very sick, tired all the time, dizzy, sometimes even feeling like I might faint. I tried telling Akin, hoping he'd take me to a doctor. Instead, he just looked at me strangely and handed me a pregnancy test. "Take this," he said coldly. My heart pounded. Pregnancy test? Why would I need that? I asked, feeling confused and scared. He didn't answer, just told me to take the test. I did, and as I waited for the result, my heart sank. When I saw the result, fear filled me. The test suggested I was pregnant. How can this be? I whispered, feeling weak and shattered. Akin stood there, watching my reaction without a hint of shame. "I'm the father," he said casually. "Every night, I put something in your drink to make you sleep. Then, I took what I wanted." It felt like my world was crumbling. Horror, betrayal, and sadness washed over me. "You're a monster," I cried. "How could you do this? You promised to take care of me and Adola." Akin's face remained cold. "I don't want a child, Alaba. You'll have to get rid of it." Tears filled my eyes, but I stood my ground. "No, I won't. This is my child. I won't let you take this away from me." Akin's voice turned icy. "You don't have a choice, Alaba. You live under my roof, and you follow my rules. Do what I say, or you'll regret it." I felt trapped, helpless, but defiant. I thought of my family back in the village, of my mother and my father, Obi, who had sent me into this nightmare. Through clenched teeth, I whispered, "I curse you, Akin, and I curse my father for sending me here without thinking of my safety." The weight of everything that had happened crashed down on me, filling me with sorrow and anger. All I wanted now was a way out. The next morning, Akin told me, "Get ready. I'm taking you to the hospital." My heart raced, remembering how Adola had once been taken to the hospital by Akin and had never come back. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Akin's face darkened, but he said nothing and left the room. I felt a brief relief, thinking he'd given up. But I didn't know he had another plan. Later that day, he brought me some food. Despite my anger, I was starving and ate it. Soon, though, I started feeling strange. My head spun, my eyes grew heavy, and I realized he'd drugged me again. When I woke up the next morning, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. I clutched my belly, fear and sadness washing over me. I had no energy, and the pain grew worse. Slowly, it sank in, I was losing the baby. Tears filled my eyes as I realized I hadn't even had a chance to decide, and now it was too late. Akin walked into my room, saw my pale face, and shrugged. "Well, that solves one problem, doesn't it? I told you I didn't want any children." Anger and heartbreak twisted my face. "You did this," I whispered, weak but furious. "You poisoned me to make me lose my child. How could you be so cruel?" he sneered. It's better this way. I never wanted a baby. You should be grateful I even let you stay here. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I could barely hold back my tears. I felt betrayed, not just by Akin, but by everything that had led me here. I thought of my father, who had trusted this man, and of my mother, who had let me go. And I thought of Adola, who had suffered so much before me. Gathering every ounce of strength, I looked Akin in the eye. I curse you, Akin, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. You have taken everything from me. But I won't stay silent. One day, you will pay for everything you've done. You think you're strong, but your cruelty will catch up with you. Akin laughed, brushing off my words. Save your curses, Alaba. You have nowhere to go and no one to help you. Remember, you're here because of your own family. But even though I was in pain and felt alone, a small spark of hope remained. I promised myself that one day, I'd find freedom, and Akin would regret everything he had done. Desperate, I decided to try escaping again. I made my way downstairs, hoping Akin wasn't around, and went to the security man at the gate. Please, I whispered, my voice shaking. I need to get out of here. Help me. I'll do anything. He looked at me with sad eyes and shook his head. I'm sorry, Alaba. Mr. Akin paid me well to make sure you don't leave. My heart dropped, but I wasn't ready to give up. I tried charming him, smiling and speaking sweetly, even sharing how lonely I was. But he remained unmoved. Go back inside, Alaba, he said sternly. Don't make this harder. I can't help you, even if I wanted to. Crushed, I returned to my room, feeling completely defeated. I had tried everything, but it was no use. I was trapped, and no one was willing to help me. That evening, I overheard Akin on the phone with my parents. I listened closely, my heart pounding as Akin lied so easily to my parents. She's doing well, he said smoothly. She's in school, getting top grades, and very happy here. You have nothing to worry about. On the other end of the call, I heard my father, Obi, laughing. That's my billionaire-in-law. I don't regret sending my daughters to you. You're a good man, Akin. I clenched my fists as Akin replied, Thank you, Obi. You're wise for trusting me with them. Don't worry, they're in good hands. He ended the call with a dark, mocking laugh that sent chills down my spine. Then I heard him mutter to himself, What a foolish man, too greedy to see the truth, and too foolish to care about his own daughter. Anger boiled inside me. My father trusted Akin so blindly, not even asking to speak to me directly. I felt completely abandoned, especially by a father who seemed to care more about the money Akin sent than about his own daughter. Akin continued talking to himself, his voice low. When I'm done with his daughters, maybe I'll pay a visit to his wife, too, he sneered. If she's anything like him, she'll be easy to control. I'll get whatever I want from that family. My eyes widened, realizing just how cruel and greedy Akin truly was. He didn't respect my family, he saw us as tools to use and discard. Despite my anger and sadness, a spark of determination rose in me. I couldn't let him continue his plans. Somehow, I had to protect myself and find a way to warn my family. I resolved to gather all my strength and courage to stop him. Back in the village, our neighbor Inoue stormed over to my mother's house, her voice loud for everyone nearby to hear. Without even knocking, she marched up to my mother, who was quietly working outside. You foolish woman! Inoue shouted, crossing her arms. You think I'll stop coming here? I won't stay silent while you and that husband of yours make terrible choices. You're both blind and greedy, sending your daughters to that man in the city. My mother looked up, surprised and a bit shaken, but tried to ignore Inoue's harsh words. She didn't want to argue with someone as bold and loud as Inoue. But Inoue wasn't finished. Leaning closer, she said, Did you know your wise husband Obi came over to my house the other day? He tried to scare my husband, telling him to keep me quiet. He thinks he can silence me. Mother's eyes widened, but she stayed silent, gripping her hands tightly. Inoue laughed sharply. Obi is nothing but a greedy fool. He doesn't care about his daughters, only money. And you let him sell your girls like they were nothing. You're just as foolish, Ebony. You're both too blind to see what's happening. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to defend herself, but she knew Inoue's words hurt because they held some truth. She trusted Obi to know what was best for us, but now she was beginning to doubt everything. Maybe you should listen for once, Ebony, Inoue continued. Do you even know what your daughter is going through? Or do you just believe whatever Obi and Akin tell you? Mother took a shaky breath, her voice trembling. I just wanted a better life for them, she whispered. Obi said Akin would take care of them. Inoue shook her head in disappointment. Open your eyes, Ebony. If you don't, it may be too late for your daughters. And then you'll have no one to blame but yourself and that greedy husband of yours. With that, Inoue turned and walked away, leaving my mother sitting there, heart heavy and mind full of worry. She realized she needed to find out the truth about her daughters, no matter the cost. Later that day, when Obi came home, Ebony was waiting for him, her face filled with worry. Obi, she began, her voice shaky, we need to talk. Since Adola died, we haven't heard Alaba's voice or seen her on a video call. I'm really worried about her. What if something's wrong? Obi sat down, unconcerned. Akin says she's fine. That's all that matters. Ebony's frustration grew. What kind of father are you? She exclaimed. You don't care about your daughter. All you care about is the money Akin gives us. How can you just believe him? Obi's face reddened with anger. He stood up, pointing a finger at her. Don't you dare insult me, Ebony. I'm the man of this house. Keep talking like that, and I'll beat you. No one will say anything, because I have a rich in-law backing me up. Ebony stepped back, hurt and shocked. You think you can threaten me? We haven't heard from Alaba in months, and you act like it doesn't matter. If Akin wanted to take all our daughters, you'd let him. They're not just things for money, Obi. Obi sneered. Of course I would. They're useless to me. Girls belong in the kitchen, not out in the world. If Akin wants them, he can take them all. Ebony felt tears in her eyes. I regret ever marrying you, Obi. I should have chosen a good man, someone who cares about his family, not a greedy man like you. Obi's anger flared. If you regret it so much, why don't you leave? No one would miss you. He clenched his fists, shouting. Ebony turned away, feeling both hurt and determined. I won't stop until I find out the truth about Alaba. I'll protect her, even if I have to do it alone. Meanwhile, I sat in my small room, feeling trapped and scared. I missed Adola so much and couldn't stop thinking about how she'd been taken from me. Akin's presence around the house made me feel even more uneasy. I knew I needed a plan to escape. One day, as I sat by the window, a thought came to me. I remembered how Akin used to take Adola out to different places. He even let her go out alone because they were dating. Maybe, I thought, if I pretend to get close to him, I can trick him into letting me go out too. I waited for the right moment, knowing Akin would be in a good mood after receiving a package from the village. I decided that my only way out was to gain his trust. So, I started spending more time with him, acting sweet and pretending to enjoy his company. It felt strange, but I reminded myself it was part of my plan. Over the weeks, I continued pretending to enjoy Akin's attention, and he started taking me to nice places, buying me gifts, and treating me like a princess. I hoped he'd eventually trust me enough to let me go out alone. But despite my efforts, Akin kept finding excuses to keep me home. You're too young to be out there alone, he'd say, brushing me off. I felt trapped again, and my hope began to fade. I realized Akin was smart and probably suspected my plan. One evening, as we sat together, I tried one last time. Akin, I said softly, can I go out tomorrow, just for a little while? I want to see the city and maybe do some shopping. Akin looked at me with an unreadable expression. You know I don't want you wandering around alone. There are dangerous people out there. What if something happens to you? My heart sank, but I pleaded, I've been good, Akin. I've done everything you wanted. Please, just a little fresh air. Akin leaned back, crossing his arms. You're clever, Alaba. I can't just let you go. What if you try to run away? Frustration overwhelmed me. I wouldn't run. I just want to see the world outside this house. But Akin shook his head. I'm not taking that risk, he said coldly. You might think I'm just being protective, but I know you're clever. And with that, he dismissed my request. I was back to feeling trapped, with no escape in sight. Akin smirked at me, his voice cold. You'd find a way to escape if I let you out, he sneered. Days turned into weeks, and I kept trying to persuade him, but he remained stubborn. He'd tell me he cared for me, but I knew he kept me close out of fear. I felt like a bird in a cage, my wings clipped, unable to fly free. One evening, as I sat on my bed, I mustered the courage to confront him. My voice shook with fear, but I managed to ask, Why are you treating me this way? Akin looked at me with cold, piercing eyes. You really want to know, he sneered. I was supposed to marry your mother a long time ago. I went abroad for a better future, and when I came back, she had married your father. Ever since, I've hated women, especially her. I was stunned. So, my mother knew about you all this time? Yes, he replied, his voice dripping with bitterness. And now, I won't let you leave this house alive. After I'm done with you, I'll deal with your sisters and your mother. I can't stand women who can't wait for their men. Fear gripped me, and chills ran down my spine. I felt completely trapped in a nightmare. That night, while Akin relaxed in the living room, I knew I had to act. Quietly, I sneaked into his room and found his gun. It felt heavy in my hands, but I knew this might be my only chance for freedom. Heart-pounding, I tucked it away and returned to my room, trying to steady myself. When Akin entered my room later, he thought he could control me like before. But this time, I was ready. Stay back. I shouted, my voice trembling but resolute, as I pointed the gun at him. Akin's eyes widened in shock. You think you can scare me with that, he scoffed, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Without hesitating, I pulled the trigger twice. The loud gunshots echoed through the house as Akin fell to the floor, lifeless. The security guard, hearing the commotion, rushed in and called the police. I stood there, shaking, but a wave of relief washed over me. Akin was gone, and I was finally free from his control. When the police arrived, they took me in for questioning. I was terrified, but determined to tell my story. In court, my lawyer worked tirelessly to prove I'd acted in self-defense. The doctor who had treated my sister Adola testified about Akin's abuse, and other parents came forward with their own stories of fear. Now that Akin was dead, they could finally speak without fear of retaliation. After listening carefully, the judge ruled in my favor, declaring that I had acted out of self-defense. I was set free and awarded money from Akin's estate to help me start anew. It felt surreal, as if I'd been given a second chance at life. With the money, I decided to go back to school to honor Adola and create a better future for myself. I studied hard, determined to succeed. Years later, standing on stage at my graduation, tears filled my eyes as I thought of Adola and everything we had been through. In my new apartment, I looked out at the busy streets below, finally feeling a sense of peace. Yet, memories of the past still weighed heavily on my heart, especially when my parents tried to reach out. After my graduation, they called, begging for forgiveness, leaving messages filled with regret. Alaba, we're so sorry for everything, my mother's voice trembled in one message. We didn't understand what you went through. Please come home. We need you. Each time I listened, my heart ached. They had sold me and Adola to a man who had caused us so much pain. How could I just forget that betrayal? The wounds were still fresh. Alaba, please, my father pleaded in another message. We made a mistake. We want to make it right. Please come back. I sighed, emotion swirling inside. I remembered the nights spent in fear, the way Akin had treated me, and the loss of Adola. Forgiving them felt impossible. I picked up my phone and typed a response, but I hesitated before sending it. Maybe one day, I thought. But today was not that day. I needed to focus on myself and the new life I'd built. After graduating, I found a job at a local nonprofit focused on empowering young women. My work was fulfilling, helping others find their voices, and it brought me a deep sense of purpose. One day, I attended a conference on women's rights, eager to connect with like-minded people. Amid the crowd, I noticed a young man with a warm smile who stood out. His name was Dyke. We struck up a conversation during a break and quickly discovered we shared a passion for helping others. He worked for a nonprofit focused on education, and we found ourselves talking about our goals and dreams. Dyke's enthusiasm was contagious, and we kept in touch after the conference. We exchanged phone numbers, and our conversations turned into long phone calls late into the night. I found myself looking forward to our chats, excited to hear from him each day. A few months later, Dyke invited me to a community event he was organizing. It was an evening filled with inspiring speeches and discussions about girls' education. We spent the night laughing, talking, and connecting with others. By the end of the event, Dyke pulled me aside. "I really enjoy spending time with you," he said softly. "Would you like to go out for dinner sometime?" I smiled, my heart racing. "I'd love that." Our first date was at a cozy little restaurant downtown. Over dinner, we shared stories about our childhoods and the experiences that shaped us. I felt a spark between us, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dyke's kindness and humor put me at ease, and I felt truly understood. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship blossomed. We explored the city, went hiking, and spent lazy Sundays at the park. Dyke was patient, always there to support me when I needed it, and never pushed me to share my past until I was ready. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Dyke turned to me, his gaze serious. "I know we haven't been together long, but I feel like I've known you forever. You inspire me, Alaba, and I want to build a future with you." My heart skipped a beat. "I feel the same way, Dyke," I admitted softly. "You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think possible." Our relationship deepened, and one day, he took me to a beautiful park filled with flowers and a serene lake. We found a quiet spot to sit, and Dyke took a deep breath. "Alaba, I want to take the next step. I want to ask you to marry me." My heart raced. "Are you serious?" "Yes," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "I love you, and I want to spend my life with you." With tears of joy, I nodded. "Yes, I'll marry you." Our wedding was a beautiful celebration of love and new beginnings, surrounded by friends and family. As I walked down the aisle, I felt like I'd finally found my place in the world. Dyke looked at me with so much adoration as we exchanged vows, promising to support each other through life's challenges. As we danced at the reception, a sense of peace and joy washed over me. I had come so far from the pain of my past, and I was grateful for the love and support I'd found with Dyke. Together, we were ready to face the future, hand in hand, with hope and love guiding our way. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take from this dramatic tale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give it a thumbs up, share it, and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.